Welcome to the Go Beyond podcast. I'm your host, Charles Scott. On this podcast, I interview exceptional leaders navigating ambition, resilience, and growth. The goal is to help you go beyond your perceived limits. As always, this show is sponsored by the 90% rule, helping leaders escape the grind of the ambitious person's trap and instead spend over 90% of your finite time and energy on things you like, you're good at, and you find meaningful. What is the ambitious person's trap, you ask? That's when you trash your physical health and emotional health in pursuit of your professional goals. The 90% rule is the antidote. Go to executivementorcharlescott.com for more. Okay, on today's show, our guest is Andrew Cooley, who's the founder and CEO of Esports Performance Academy, which provides holistic performance coaching, certifications, software, and events globally to the esports scene. So welcome, Andrew.
Thanks for having me, Charles.
Yeah, no problem. I'm going to ask you about your work in just a second. But before I do, I always love to start with this question. If you could go back in time and talk with your 18-year-old self, what advice would you give?
Oh, man. Not too much, but I think to keep it simplistic, learn how to have a good balance for everything in life. Not just, certain things, but I think for everything in life. But particularly for stress and how to manage workflow and balance. I think that goes with your opening a little bit, and I'm sure we'll address that on the discussion. But yeah, I think that maintaining balance for things in life would be the biggest advice.
Yeah, great. And Andrew's taken my executive mentoring workshop and knows that I'm all about this. We've worked together in the past, and so I love your answer, and it's good advice. It's so easy to get consumed with your passion and what you get excited about. And so, yeah, along those lines, so tell me about Esports Performance Academy. So how did it start and what is your vision?
Sure. So as you know, since we've talked, I've been in esports for 25 years as of this year. It's been, two-thirds of my life, basically, actually about 70% of my life.
Yeah.
Gaming has been my entire life. And so it spawned out of the desire to try and help the future generations tackle all the pain points that I went through as a kid, basically. I went through, coaching and everything throughout my career, and then I became a coach. And it was one of those things that it was very eye-opening. And esports has this fantastic pro scene. You see it all the time, broadcast everywhere. And it's amazing to watch, but there's not as much structured connectivity to the pro scene. Now there's more connectivity than there was, 5-10 years ago, but it's not as structured. And so that's really where it came from. It's just wanting to help the next generation. If they want to go pro, have the opportunity to go pro. If they want to get a scholarship, have the opportunity to get a scholarship. If they just want to be able to make friends in a good community, have the opportunity to do that.
Yeah. So when you say the pro scene, I'm sure there are some people listening to this podcast right now not knowing what you mean by that. So maybe can you give just a brief introduction to what is esports? What exactly are we talking about here for someone who's not familiar with the term and didn't even realize there's a professional esport person or opportunity or option out there as a career?
Yeah, happy to dig into that. So I usually try to break it down where it's, gaming and esports. So everybody enjoys playing games. And then there's, recreational sports that you can kind of parallel to that, where you can go out and you can play a game of basketball or football with your friends. But whenever you want to go and you want to add structure to it, that's where gaming becomes esports. That's where the backyard game of, traditional sports becomes collegiate or the NFL or something of that nature. And so you're adding a lot more structure and specificity, intentionality to the training, to what you're doing, essentially. And so you're competing with a team on a stage against another team on a stage, in the pro scene, obviously, for hundreds of thousands and millions of dollars. And I know that some people are unaware that you can win millions or tens of millions of dollars from playing video games, but
Crazy.
It is in 2026, and for the last several years, it's been a thing. But that's kind of what the pro scene looks like. I know we discussed it earlier. We have a video on our website to kind of breaks that down as far as being able to help beginners understand what esports is if they're interested in the industry.
Yeah. And so the title of the video is Esports 101. And what's the website? Where would a person go if they wanted to see that?
EPA.gg. The domain, people always question, they're like, what? .gg in gaming and in esports means good game. And so it became a very, unique thing for the gaming industry. So that's why the domain is odd if people are like, why is this? Yeah.
That's great. So an EPA stands for Esports Performance. So P is in Peter, P is in Performance Academy.gg, and go to
Correct.
Esports 101. Awesome. All right. So you remind me, this is reminding me there's a judgment element here. So my son, when he was in high school, loved gaming. He was gaming all the time. I mean, hours and hours. I'm like, dude, you need to take a break. And I judged him as his dad, and I would get fussy sometimes and tell him he needed to stop playing games and he needed to do his homework. And what he would do is he would spend like 10 minutes on his homework. He'd half-ass his homework, and then he'd go back and he'd be playing League of Legends for like 8 hours with his buddies. And it was a problem. It caused conflict between us. And then I started reflecting on my judgment as a father. And I love homework. No, I don't love homework. I love academic success. I think academic success is important. I think a work ethic's really important. But what I realized is I started observing the way that he played. My son was not alone in his room, bleary-eyed in the dark, solo and eating crap food. That was not what he was doing. He was always playing with his group of friends. And I would listen in, and he would be barking orders, with his headset on. And I realized, oh, he's a platoon commander. Right? That's what he was. He was totally a platoon commander. And he's like, he was the leader of his group. And he's like, no, go right. Like he was. And so I'm like, oh, he's actually socializing and learning leadership skills. So now he's 25 years old. He went to college. He's actually, I'm going to brag about him. He's a grad student at Berkeley right now. He got into a good graduate program. So even though he kind of half-assed his high school homework, he turned out okay. And his friends live all over the world, and he socializes with them by playing games. The same thing. They play online together. And so in retrospect, I was too narrow in my thinking as a dad. I'm just going to own that. And I understand better the skills that he was developing. So he did this really for socializing, and it was fun for him. He was developing certain skills. But I guess my question is, did your parents judge you? And maybe do they still judge you for the job that you have? And do you come across this judgment in general? And is there any way you like to approach it?
Yeah, I think that yes, for sure. I think that your son and I would get along great. I think that yeah, my parents did judge me pretty harshly. Yeah, and I don't think that it was unwarranted because it was such a foreign concept. Is it was a completely new thing, and I'm still defining what it is on this conversation, right? So it's not completely known.
Yeah.
So yeah, they didn't have a lot of patience for that. They, much like you, wanted me to do well in academics. My sister was a straight A student, never made a B in anything. And so, in that shadow, I kind of paled in comparison. And so it was one of those things where my dad's most famous quote was, "Get off that damn game."
Exactly.
That became just like the standard.
I think your dad and I would get along well.
Yeah. And so like my parents were very concerned about my grades. I remember whenever I left financial services to start to resurrect my it was decided to be like Dallas's pro esports organization. My mom took me to lunch, and she was very concerned that I was just a gaming addict. And I was so offended. And that was I was like, and the only thing that I could think to say, and this was not great because I'm not trying to compare myself to Michael Jordan, but I responded, I said, "Was Michael Jordan addicted to basketball?" And she was like, "Well, no." And I was like, "Okay." So it was one of those things of, it took some time, and it took some wearing down and a lot of conversations. But I think the concern, my parents always wanted what was best for me, and the concern, it was fair. I think it was their approach that probably, needed some fine tuning. But to the point, whenever I started working at Optic, and I'll say, that was my first big thing in esports. I called my dad, and, I was making good money. I was head coach, and then I transitioned to president and everything over there. And I said, "Aren't you so glad I didn't get off that damn game?" And he goes, "I have no idea what you do for a living now." And so
he's not gonna agree on this one.
Well, I have a fantastic relationship with my parents. We joke about it now, and I'm very thankful for that. But it was one of those things that now my parents see what I do. They see that I'm happy doing it. They don't completely understand it, but they are supportive of it. And whenever I show them, "Hey, we've done this thing," they think that it's cool. So
Yeah,
Turned a corner
I
at
love
least.
it. No, great. And your parents are right after my heart, but also they're it sounds like they traveled a similar journey. I had to travel a journey as well too, and I appreciate it. And I love your analogy with Michael Jordan too, because this I guess segues into my final question for you here. What I've noticed is, people when they get passionate about something, when they're captured by an idea. I work with a lot of entrepreneurs, and an entrepreneur will come up with a great business idea, and they just pour their heart and soul into it. Some people, become writers, or actors, whatever you choose. The secret to success, we all know, is hard work, dedication, consistent effort over time. And so you're doing a version of that, but for esports, and your mother viewed it as an addiction, whereas in another context, it would be viewed as that's why he's the greatest basketball player of all time, kind of thing. But so the question I have is about the ambitious person's trap. And I mentioned it in the intro to this podcast, and you mentioned a version of it, your advice to your 18-year-old self about balance. And so my question is, to what degree have you fallen into the ambitious person's trap? Have you found not just gaming, but in building this company, that it's difficult to set healthy boundaries between all the demands at work and your vision for the growth, with the need to take care of your physical health and emotional health? And by the way, if you haven't done a good job, it's fine to be an object lesson instead of a role model. That I always say that's either way works. But how have you felt? Like, have you fallen into the ambitious person's trap? And if so, how have you gotten out of it, or have you avoided it?
Yeah, no, I'm not even gonna try and lie to you. I definitely have fallen into it. Yeah, I think the ironic thing is what we do for a living is we try to teach kids how to do the things the right way, right? To your point, is like
Yeah.
our software focuses on all these things: proper sleep, hydration, physical fitness, so on and so forth. But yeah, it's hard whenever you are focused on something to maintain those things for yourself. I am at the tail end of 300 hours in the last 3 weeks, and that is not good. Candidly, we both know that's not good. It's one of those things where I realized what was happening and why it kept happening is I was getting the same kind of dopamine from working, from seeing the productivity, from seeing what like my team and I were building, that I was from
Hmm.
playing a game. And it's one of those things where you don't want to set the project down because you feel like you're going to lose the momentum because of riding that dopamine, that productivity. And so, my wife and I have talked about the hours that I put in over the past couple weeks, and it is one of those things where I'm trying to be better about it. Especially since I've originally talked with you and had you work with me and everything. It's one of those things where I can't be perfect about it, and I know that. And me trying to be perfect about it just makes my anxiety worse.
Yeah.
So the best thing that I can do is try and recognize, like I am right now, that this isn't good. And I try to fluctuate between like, okay, this is sprint time, and this is like calm time, and this is when you need some time off. And I'm trying to be better about it, like I keep saying. But no, I've
Yeah.
definitely fallen into it. I'm in the middle of it. I'm trying to get out of it.
Yeah. Well, and also, the context for your 300 hours the last 3 weeks is that you have a launch as well, that you're announcing today, right? So I think if you talk to a tax accountant in April,
Right.
they don't have a balanced life. If you talk to a basketball player during NBA finals, like there's one thing they're doing, one thing only, and it can be extreme. So to your point, all athletes peak for their peak races, but then they recover. And so, it sounds like you're due for a recovery phase here, and that's the work that I do with executives, which is figuring out how do you structure your year where when your peaks are, and you peak for that, and it's fine if you get a little bit out of balance in that context, but then you recover, and so you're thinking from a macro point of view what that flow is. No, and I appreciate that you own it. It's great. Some people try to pretend they're not, but nice job just being honest. That's great. And I would say in the end, it's a daily work, isn't it? So that's the
Yeah.
message. All the people I work with, just every day you have to prove you can do it again. Conceptually, we all understand work-life balance is important and setting boundaries is important, but it's easy to fall out of that. And so the key is you're constantly reminding you, and that's why I have this podcast. It's a constant reminder for people to pause and think, wait, am I setting healthy boundaries? Am I falling into the ambitious person's trap? How do I get out of it? And step one is talk about it. So thank you for being a good role model for that. So
Of course.
okay, and so so the best way for people to get in touch with you. So we mentioned the website before, so maybe share it one more time. So how would people find out about you or be in touch with you if they wanted?
Yeah, so if they want to get in touch, it's just epa.gg. So stands for Esports Performance Academy, just the acronym, and then .gg for good game.
Awesome. All right. Thank you, Andrew. I appreciate it. What I'll do here, let me just do the outro. So thank you for being on the show. As a reminder to everyone listening, this show is sponsored by the 90% rule, helping leaders escape the grind of the ambitious person's trap and instead spend over 90% of your finite time and energy on things you like, you're good at, and you find meaningful. To learn more, go to executivementorcharlescott.com. And until next episode, go beyond your perceived limits and live the 90% life.